Here comes Johnny Appleseed. Apple seeds are all he needs. Planting apples on his way out west. Wears a pot upon his head. Under the trees he makes his bed. Folks say Johnny's apples are the best. We all remember that poem from kindergarten. But really, who was Johnny Appleseed? There wasn't really this ragamuffin guy walking all over the country with a pot on his head and tossing apple seeds everywhere, right? Um, yeah, turns out there was. John Chapman was born on September 26, 1774, in Leominster, Massachusetts. Early in his life, he dreamt of producing so many apples that no one would ever go hungry. We may think today of this affable guy wandering around, but John Chapman was a man with a plan. Research reveals him to be a genuine marketing and business genius. Over 50 years, he bought and sold land and developed thousands of apple trees from Pennsylvania to Ontario. In 1792, at 18 years old, he started his travels. The plan was simple: gather seeds at the cider presses, separate them into different varieties, and head west. He gathered many different varieties from his starting point in Massachusetts all the way down to Pennsylvania. Step one, check. Now, to head west, making his way to the Ohio Valley and then on to Indiana, always making sure to stay ahead of the major migration waves, and each year planted apple seeds further west. Popular legends assert that he was tossing seeds everywhere, open country, by the roadside, and the streams, but unfortunately, deeds and records dull the myth a bit. He bought the land, cared for it, nurtured his trees, and sold them. Before he was known as Johnny Appleseed, they simply called him the Appleseed Man. His visits to whatever community were looked forward to, and no door was ever closed to him. As he was itinerant as a rule, he moved around frequently, so when he arrived in a settlement, he was sought out for the news from abroad. He was well liked and respected, and he was also religious, and in an era of religious fervor, he preached in his travels. As you might suspect, his favorite book was the Bible. Johnny Appleseed was described as medium height, blue eyes, light brown hair, slender, wiry, and alert. I can think of worse descriptions. Now, folklore describes his apparel as funny looking. Remember, this was a man with a plan. His goal was never to be a rich man, he wanted to be a good man. He would trade apples and apple trees for settlers' cast off clothing. Kind of frugal, if you ask me. I mean, really? Clothes essentially for free? Not a bad deal, but he would also give away clothing to those more in need than he. This could possibly be the impetus for the legend's origin of having coffee sacks with holes cut out for arms. He rarely wore shoes or sought the shelter of houses. Apparently, he really liked being outdoors. And the mush pot on his head? Sorry, not buying it. Most evidence points to him just wearing ill fitting hats most of his life. In 1842, Johnny made his last trip back to Ohio. After 50 years tramping across the country, planting and caring for his beloved apple trees as he would his own children, he called it quits, and he moved into the home of his brother Nathaniel. One visit to a friend, one William Worth in Indiana, he came down with pneumonia, the first time he'd ever gotten sick, as legend goes, and passed away on March 18th, 1845. No one knows exactly where he is buried. There is a memorial stone in Fort Wayne, Indiana, though, to John Johnny Appleseed Chapman. With apple season right around the corner, I thought we would make something Johnny might approve of. So today, we're going to make my grandmother's recipe for apple harvest cake on Taste Buds Through Time. Hello, welcome to Taste Buds Through Time. I am your host, Brian Parkhurst, and with fall right around the corner and baking season upon us, I thought we'd go ahead and get a head start on the season. Let's go ahead and make ourselves an apple harvest cake. Now, in my neck of the woods, we've got a lot of orchards, and in October, which is at this point about a month and a couple weeks away, we have the Apple Harvest Festival, and they have everything apple. Apple fritters, apple cakes, apple pie, you name it apple, and they have it.
Well, ever since I was a little kid, my grandmother made an apple harvest cake, and it was one of the greatest things that I remember from my childhood. So I thought I'd share the recipe with you guys today. Since it came from my grandmother, I'm pretty sure she obtained it right around the beginning of this century, well, the Great Depression era. So we're going to go ahead with some apples, walnuts, nutmeg, cinnamon, and clove. And when you add those ingredients together, you know you're going to get something special. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to begin with apples. We're going to go ahead and take 4 apples. We're going to peel them. We're going to cube them. And then we're going to add sugar. With the apples cubed, we're going to take 2 cups of sugar. And then we're going to mix it in, get them nice and coated. And one thing you need to remember about this cake is there's not a lot of liquid going into this cake. And most of the liquid that we're going to get is literally going to come from the apples from the process that we're doing right now. Now, the technical term for what we're doing is we're going to let the fruit macerate, but I just like to say it's getting all happy and ready to know each other. Now that we've got to this point, we're going to cover it. We're going to put it in the refrigerator for at least an hour. I would recommend 2. And then after that's done, we'll get back, we'll add everything else together and go from there. Well, I've had the luxury of time around my house, so I've actually let the apples go for 2 hours and got some stuff done around the homestead. But one thing that is important to mention is that during the hour or two while you have the apples getting all happy, come in a few times, stir it up with the spoon so the sugar doesn't settle at the bottom and you get a just nice, even, consistent texture all the way through. All right, so like I said, there's not a lot of moisture that's going into this cake batter, but we're going to start out, and once again, I'm going to go ahead and post the recipe in the description at the end of the video. But we're going to start out with 3 cups of flour. Now, sounds like the kids down the road are getting all happy about knowing the cake's being made too. And to that, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon each of cinnamon, nutmeg, and a quarter of a teaspoon of clove. These being the dry ingredients, go ahead and mix them up, get them all nice and incorporated. But this is pretty much the last time that you're going to be using a whisk in your dry ingredients. Now that we've done that, I'm going to take 4 eggs. And I got to be honest with you, we got a duck over there, and I'm not too sure that some of these white eggs that I'm cracking open are not duck eggs. It's not going to affect the flavor of my cake. I'm sure it wouldn't affect the flavor of yours either. So have some fun, experiment. So I'm going to go ahead, beat the eggs up. I'm going to pour that in on top of the dry. We're going to put 1 cup of vegetable oil in. And like I said, this is not going to work with this batter. So just go straight to the spoon or the other kind of spatula, whichever one you prefer. I get this all mixed up to the point where everything's incorporated, but not completely mixed up. Because we have one more element, well, 2 more elements to throw in, but one more element which contains a little bit more moisture. All right, now we've got still some dry left in here. At this point in time, we're going to go ahead and put your 1 teaspoon of vanilla and 1 cup of walnuts in. Now, by keeping the batter semi-dry as you're putting the walnuts in, you're going to get a good coating of the flour on the walnuts, which is going to help suspend them in the batter, so you won't have a whole bunch of walnuts at the top of your cake and nothing else below it. This should help them suspend and distribute evenly throughout the batter. Now comes the apples. I want you to see, look at all that juice that's coming off of those apples. That's the sugar that brought all the natural liquid out of the apple, and that's just pure flavor going in. Now throw them in there. Don't miss a drop. It's gold. Now, like I said earlier, I'm using Granny Smith apples, but you don't have to use Granny Smith. I like Granny Smith because they're a little tart and they hold up very well under the baking process, so they're not going to be mush. There are other apples out there which will suffice just as well. Honey Crisps work very well in this. I would also say Macintosh apples work very well in this, but do not, under any circumstances, do not get Red and Delicious. Red and Delicious apples have been made in the corporate world, and they were made for the color, not the texture, not the flavor. They just look pretty. There's nothing delicious about them, but they are definitely red. Now, at this point, we've got everything mixed nice and thoroughly. So we're going to transfer our batter to a very well buttered and floured bundt pan. It is a distinct possibility that you will make a mess doing this. It happens. Don't worry about it. And that's why we have children. We can tell them to go clean the kitchen. All right. See all that goodness go in the pan. Okay. Distribute this as evenly as you can around the bundt pan. And then go ahead and give it a nice thump to settle everything. And let's get it in the oven. Okay, so I've got my oven heated to moderate, which would translate to the oven in your kitchen at about 350 degrees. When we put this in the oven, you're going to want to bake it between 45 minutes to an hour, depending on your oven. So at the 45-minute mark, come back, check it, and when you can insert a toothpick into it and pull it out and it's clean, you know you're done. All right. See you in a little bit. All right, time check on this oven is now at 1 hour and 15, maybe 1 hour and 20 minutes. It wasn't quite done at the hour mark, so I let it go. Let's see what we got going on here. It smells wonderful. Oh, it looks wonderful. Look at that. That's gorgeous. All right, let's go ahead and make sure that she's done. That's coming out clean. 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 All right, we got no residue on the skewer, which means that the cake is cooked all the way through. Now the only thing to do is sit it on the counter, wait till the morning, and have some for breakfast. See you on the AM. All right, folks, I can already feel a flood of memories coming over me because this is just one of those cakes that takes you back. Everybody's got one of those foods. This is the one that does it for me. It takes me back to pulling into Grandma and Grandpa's driveway, getting out, running across the front yard. There they are. They're waiting for us. And then once we get through, Grandmom's got that cake sitting on the counter cooling. So let's go ahead and give it a try. It's fantastic. It is evenly distributed walnuts, apples, all through the peak. I can't wait. Mmm. Mmm. Yeah. And definitely the tart from the apple is fantastic, along with the sweetness. And it's just, this is the cake that tells you that the holiday season is coming. So do me a favor, go ahead and make this cake, and then let me know in the comments what you think about it. Is it as good as I describe it, or am I just suffering from the Mandela effect? Thanks for stopping by the homestead. I really hope you give this one a try. See y'all next time.